In Africa, there are no elections that are free and fair because most of our elections are highly contested. There are so many players involved, including outside forces. So the elections in Cameroon also fall into the same category of highly contested elections. You must understand that the incumbent has overstayed in power. He has actually, we can say that he has overlived his welcome.
Yeah.
So he's being viewed from across the divide, including the English-speaking Ambazonia region, as an invisible candidate, as a ghost candidate, because he's being propped up there by some occupying force, and they feel marginalized to the extent that the elections themselves, the processes leading to the polling day, were highly contested. So the Ambazonians in southwest Cameroon consider the elections as rigged, and most of the voters in southern Cameroon did not turn up on the polling day. So that leaves a huge question mark on the elections themselves.
What are some of the sticking points that make you feel that the elections were not free and fair?
First, the electoral system itself. Remember, it is first past the post.
Yes.
Plurality voting, which is very, very problematic, especially in Africa, because it guarantees that the bigger parties will always win. So despite their geographical location or despite the distribution of the voters, if it has a highly concentrated base, a stronghold, the major parties always win, and it favors the incumbency. So plurality voting, especially first past the post, favors the incumbent, and it favors the party that is in power. So that's one of the sticking points. Also, the processes, the electoral processes leading up to the registration of voters, and also voters against the electoral list. This has always been a problematic, I think, highly contested thing across the African continent. So in Cameroon as well, the opposition parties also are challenging that. The third point is 9 contesting presidential candidates. I think the opposition was split up. The opposition was not united. They were supposed to mount a united force against the incumbent. If they really stood any chance of defeating Paul Biya, they were supposed to unite and present one common candidate as the face of the opposition. But they failed to do it. Even a week before the elections, there were some signs that they were going to unite, present one candidate, but they failed to do so. So this is a self-inflicted damage to us as Africans, because every time we are challenged when it comes to unity, we have failed to achieve African unity, even after the departure of the founder himself, Osagyefo, Kwame Nkrumah. We have failed to unite as Africans, and we continue to fall behind. We continue to suffer setbacks because the imperialist forces thrive on divide and rule. And the same thing happens in Cameroon. We have seen that the incumbent himself is in power since 1981. Yeah. For 37 years now. He has managed to change the constitution to remove the presidential term limits, which guarantees him another victory. If he emerges victorious now, it means that he will be in power for another 7-year term. This is another sticking point. And the other one is Ambazonia itself. Yes. Remember that this is southern Cameroon. It used to be part of eastern Nigeria, but after the Second World War, when Germany was finally defeated in the Second World War, the United Nations partitioned it and gave it a plebiscite opportunity to vote whether to join Nigeria or to go into Cameroon. Okay. So I think what British Cameroon did, because it was given to Britain after the defeat of after the defeat of Germany, southern Cameroon was given to Britain, and then northern Cameroon was given to the Francophone. So what happened is the British Cameroon, because of the British system of divide and rule, was further partitioned into northern Cameroon and southern Cameroon.
And I do understand that the Anglophone community didn't vote. What have you heard with regards to that?
Yeah, the Anglophone community refused to go out to vote because they feel that the election is being managed, and it's being it's a farce because it is being managed and it has been organized by an occupying force. They do not recognize the regime in Yaoundé. They feel that Paul Biya is there to serve the interests of the imperialists who have continued to exploit and extract resources in southern Cameroon. Remember that most of the resources in Cameroon are located in the southern part of Cameroon, which is Anglophone. So the Anglophone have continued to export these resources to France and other Western nations, but they have not received any dividends. For years, the resources continue to be extracted from southern Cameroon. We are talking about oil. We are talking about timber, forest. All these resources are based
and interestingly,
in
Edward,
Cameroon.
Interestingly, I mean, Cameroon was founded in 1961 on the promise of federalism, on the promise of autonomy for its regions. And we understand that President Paul Biya didn't visit those communities, those Anglophone communities, and a 48-hour curfew was imposed on those communities.
Yeah, but you remember that Paul Biya himself didn't support
federalism. So it gives a great deal of
federalism.
isolation of those communities.
He didn't support federalism in the first place because he knew that with federalism, those local people would have some autonomy to determine their destiny. They would be in charge of their own resources. So what he did was, after some years in power, he changed the constitution again, back to a republic of Cameroon. It used to be the Federal Republic of Cameroon, remember. But when he abolished the federalism, he reverted back to a Republic of Cameroon, which ensured a unitary state, a centralized state, which means that they did not devolve power to the Ambazonia, to the southern Cameroons, and they remained like that for so many years to the extent that they started imposing the Francophone system on the southern Cameroons, who had thrived through the Anglo-Saxon system of education, had thrived through the Anglo-Saxon system of judiciary. All these were abolished, and now they started exporting civil servants from Francophone Cameroon into the English-speaking regions, which means that all those people who had spent so many years in school, you know, vying for public service positions were marginalized. So all the English-speaking lawyers and teachers feel marginalized because they don't occupy those pivotal roles in civil service. So that's the crux of the matter. It first started as a crisis of identities, but as this crisis, Anglophone problem continued, it turned into a crisis of governance. Okay. That's the main crisis of the matter because governance is a highly contested issue.
Okay, going back to the fragmentation of the opposition, which you rightly mentioned earlier on, I mean, it's safe to say that some of the opposition leaders, especially the smaller opposition parties, are just doing it not for the intents and purposes of winning, but just for getting a smaller share of the spotlight. I mean, the more serious contenders with the likes of Joshua Ossi, Akere Muna, Maurice Kamto are not only competing against Paul Biya, but they are competing against each other. So essentially, they're handing over Paul Biya victory on a silver platter. So one analyst actually put it rightly so, and it provided so much food for thought that, you know, they are actually looking forward to 2025 because they knew that 2018 they're definitely not going to win it, and they're essentially doing it not to give, I mean, to give Paul Biya a hard time.
But that's one of the issues that most analysts across Africa do not understand. They do not understand because most of the analysts I've listened to, they do not go deeper to analyze the underlying problem. You know, they just scratch the surface because the problem in Cameroon is deep-rooted. You remember that all regimes propped by global capitalism will create its own opposition. And most of these smaller parties you see there, they've been created by the incumbent and the ruling party. It happens everywhere across the African continent. Even in South Africa, the National Party created the ANC. The ANC created the DA and the EFF. So all parties that are in power are propped up by the system of global capitalism. And global capitalism doesn't like being ambushed. They will remain in power forever, even if you remove George Bush or you elect Al Gore. Remember, that's what happened in the US as well. You know, Al Gore was touted to win the elections, but because the Bush family, which is the ruling family in the US, created its own opposition in the name of the Green Party. Raf Nader, remember, from the Green Party, split the vote from the opposition. With that 2.7 vote that Raf Nader got, you know, it was supposed to go to Al Gore. And then finally, when George Bush finally took Florida, which is his base, he was the victor, he was the winner. So this is what happens, because the system, most analysts do not understand that the system of global capitalism was created to ensure that all the counterparts, like neoliberalism, democracy, and the system of slavery remain intact.
You're making a good point, but then what do you make of the outlook or the makeup of Cameroon's cabinet? I mean, Paul Biya reconstructed the coalition, roped in some of the opposition members and then gave them plush positions, but then he did maintain control of the economic cluster. I mean, it's now made Cameroon having one of the biggest cabinet with about 65 cabinet ministers in Africa.
You know, the size of the cabinet is not a contentious issue. We might have as big as a cabinet we want, if it is there to deliver on the mandate and the interests of the people. This is a diversion. You know, most of the times, global capitalism would present a big cabinet as, you know, taking a strain on the resources. The issue is, it's not the size of the cabinet itself, but what is that cabinet meant to do for the people of Cameroon? What I'm saying is, unity is the answer in Cameroon. Not separatist movements, not secession. The people have no option but to take up arms to fight a regime that does not represent them. That's why we have secessionist movement in Cameroon. Those people do not want to be secessionists. So what Paul Biya can do, even at his old age, at 85, if he wants to leave a legacy for the people of Africa, in the traditions of Thomas Sankara, in the traditions of Patrice Lumumba, what he needs to do is to unite the nation. Forget about who is propping him up to remain in power. Forget about all the external forces that have forced him to forget about delivering on the mandate. He can still leave a legacy now. As I'm sitting here, he can still leave a legacy for the people of Cameroon and the people of Africa by uniting the nation. Three things. One, he has to change the constitution again, to change the constitution to ensure a state that will deliver on the promises he made when he took power in 1981. Okay. One of the things he can do is to adopt Pan-Africanism as the driving force of his policy formulation in government, and on the driving force of policy implementation. Because I'm baffled that looking at all the 9 candidates that have been returned by the Electoral Commission, there's no Pan-Africanist of sort there. You can't tell who is a Pan-Africanist. All those candidates are playing up to a system that has kept us captive for a long time. We are playing catch-up to the system of neoliberalism, which will not benefit the African continent. All the speeches I've given throughout the African continent have emphasized that we need to build a new cadre of leadership. Forget about the contestations that were there in Cameroon. He can still decide, after gaining victory in 7 days' time, when the Electoral Commission announces him as the winner, he can bring all these contesting candidates to the table and say, we want to form a government of national unity which will answer to the people of Cameroon and not to France or Britain. So this can still happen, even with a bigger size of cabinet. I don't have any gripe with the size of the cabinet if it is going to deliver on the mandate.
You keep on emphasizing the importance of unity. Fine, it is very important, but then it can never solve the issue of poverty. His last term, or his Paul Biya's current term, the economy grew by about plus or minus 4%, but Cameroon remains one of the poorest countries in Africa. What can be done?
60% of the GDP comes from the English-speaking region in Ambazonia. So, as I've said, all the resources that are being extracted and exported, shipped to France in their raw form, come from Ambazonia.
Yes.
So if he unites the nation, he will cut costs, because now the secessionist movement wants to make Ambazonia ungovernable. That's an extra strain on the budget. That's an extra strain on the fiscus of Nigeria, of Cameroon.
Yes.
He's also busy, preoccupied with fighting Boko Haram militants to the north of Cameroon. That is another strain on the fiscus of Cameroon. And this is money that is being paid for by the taxes of the people who have suffered for so long. So if he can unite Cameroon, he will cut costs, expenditure on defense and the military. He is spending a lot of billions fighting an insurgency that is not supposed to be there in the first place. If he had prioritized on the promises that he made to the Cameroonian people, this is a necessary strife. Remember that these crises are pitting black people against other black people. Yes. Yes. All the people who are benefiting from this crisis are sitting there in Paris, in Champs-Élysées, sipping their wines, champagnes. So the black people are busy mutilating, killing each other in Ambazonia, in Bamenda, in Buea. They are busy raping women. The soldiers are being sent there to rape women, kill children. Schools are closed down. Hospitals are closed down. And these are people who do not know the character and content of the war. Where is it coming from? They are just persuaded to fight because they believe that by fighting the soldiers, they are going to gain independence. The people who are benefiting from the exploitation and the resource extraction are sitting in Yaoundé, are sitting in Paris, are sitting in England. So I'm saying to you that unity is the answer. Remember Osagyefo, Kwame Nkrumah said, Africa must unite or perish.
Yes.
If Africa does not unite, we will forever be enslaved to a narrative that seems to suggest that our saviors are not located here in Africa. Our saviors are located in the Western capitals. If we do not unite, we will forever be enslaved to Western domination and exploitation, which has kept us underdeveloped and underemployed for a long time. Remember, what is happening now is the same strategy of partitioning of territories. Okay. Who is funding the secessionist movement in Ambazonia? Okay. Who is training these young people in Ambazonia? We must start to ask questions, because you remember capitalism thrives on divide and rule. Okay. The extent to which these regimes of capture, of resource extraction and exploitation succeed in dividing us.
We don't have much time, unfortunately. Just a quick one. Maurice Kamto, the opposition leader, has declared himself the ultimate winner in this election without the Electoral Commission having declared him so. I mean, this has been a growing trend in most of the African countries. We've seen it recently in Zimbabwe, we've seen it in Kenya, we've seen it in the DRC in the era of Etienne Tshisekedi. What gives them the mandate to declare themselves the winners without having the superior mandate, as it were?
There are a number of factors. One is desperation. Remember that people are crying out for change. If people don't see change, opposition candidates will come up with all sorts of games. He's simply grandstanding, because that's the only way. He does not have any power. He doesn't have gunpowder to fight the regime in Yaoundé. So all he can do is to grandstand for his supporters, or optics. So these are simply optics for the camera.
What sort of benefit do they derive from that, if at all?
There are no benefits for the people. There is nothing in it for the people except for the theater of politics. People do not eat politics. People eat development and the process of development. And this has been denied to the people of Cameroon for a long time. All these candidates, they are there to serve the interests of the same power oligarchs that have kept Cameroonian people captive for a long time. So Maurice Kamto, including all those other lawyers from the university who are contesting, they are in league to deny the people of Cameroon their true freedom. So they are serving the same system of capture, of global capitalism that has kept us as slaves for a long time.